Hello!
Hello and welcome back to All Our Families.
Now, making a pond in your garden at home is one of the best things you can do to encourage wildlife into your garden.
But it doesn't have to be a big, elaborate, expensive job, does it?
No, we're going to make a mini pond actually, and it's really simple and it's a great way to use and upcycle items that are hanging around the garden or in your shed in order to make this mini pond. And just because it's a small pond doesn't mean it doesn't have any value to wildlife. And just to prove that, a few years back in our old house, we left a takeaway tub out in the garden by accident. It filled with rainwater, and actually a frog laid its spawn in that takeaway tub. So even the smallest pond has some wildlife value.
For our mini pond, we're going to need to dig a hole. But I'm leaving James to do all the hard work while I go inside for a cup of tea.
Great. Now, there's no hard and fast rule as to how big or small your mini pond has to be, but this kind of thing makes a great container for a mini pond. An old plastic tub, which of course hasn't got any holes in the bottom, this is going to work very well. But what we're using is this. We've got an old flexi tub here and the handles have broken off it, so it's not that useful to us, but we can make good reuse of it, we can recycle it for our mini pond. Here's the spot that I've chosen for our mini pond, and it's a corner of the garden that really isn't doing a lot for us at the minute, so it's a good place for it. But also it's important where you site your own mini pond. You want to have a good amount of sun, but not sun all day, and that's what we've chosen here. Equally, you don't want your mini pond to be in the shade all day either. That's enough talking for now. What I've got to do now is the hard work, and any kids looking to do this job might want to get an adult to help, because now it's time to stop talking and get digging. We're going to start off by marking out the size of the container so we're not digging a hole bigger than we need to. So put it upside down and then mark out the space with your spade. Well, there we go, all done. Hopefully I made that look easy, and it's a good fit for our bucket. Now, what if you don't want to dig a hole for your mini pond? Well, that's totally fine, it can work just as well, but remember, you need to build up some sides around it, even if it's just on one side, before you fill it with water, because wildlife needs a way to get in and out of it in case they get trapped in the pond. The other thing I'd do if you're using a container just standing on the ground like this is to put a few stones around it just to help secure it in place as well. Now, before you put your container in the hole and start filling it around it, there's one extra step that you might want to consider, especially if you're using a container that is made of hard, more brittle plastic. Our flexi tub is a little bit rubbery by its nature, but even so, I'm still going to do this so I can show you. And what I've got is a bit of sand. And we're going to put some of this sand at the bottom going underneath the container, and this is just going to cushion it once it's full of water from any rocks or little sharp objects that might be in the ground, and just help prevent it from developing any splits over time as the soil settles. If you haven't got any sand, don't worry, just have a good check around the hole and make sure there's no stones really sticking out. If there are, remove those. You want to have nice soft earth around your container. What I'm going to do now is just fill in around the sides to make sure that the soil, or sand if you've got some left over, is touching the sides nicely and the whole thing's secure in the hole. So I'll use some of the soil we dug out of the hole. What we want to be careful, of course, is that we don't put that soil inside the bucket. There we go, we'll keep doing that all the way around. Now, I had a little bit of gravel hanging around the garden with no job for it, but it's got one now. I've put it in the bottom of our bucket here, and that's going to create a nice little gravel bed for any little pond plants that eventually will root in there when we put them in, but also little hidey holes and microhabitat for the freshwater invertebrates and mini beasts that are going to call this pond home. Now the next stage in building our mini pond is to put even more items inside the container. And you might ask, well, why are we doing that? Surely we're filling up all the space and leaving less room for the water. But there's a couple of good reasons for this. So get some old bricks, stones, maybe a bit of old roofing slate, whatever you've got hanging around that will do the trick. And you can arrange these items in the pond in such a way that you make a staircase or a ramp so any creatures that fall in the pond can climb out to safety. The second reason for doing this is that it's going to create even more little nooks and crannies and hidey holes, which are going to be great for the pond mini beasts, and they can really make the home their own. Now, if you want your mini pond to look absolutely top notch, you're probably going to want to disguise the fact that you're using an old recycled plastic container. So first, level the ground up to the rim, and then we'll disguise the edge of our bucket with some nice stones. Well, it's finally the moment to put the water in our pond. You could let it just fill it with rainwater, but we've got some water butts here which come right off the roof, and that's going to be perfect for what we want. One thing I will say, don't use tap water, because tap water contains chemicals which we don't want in our pond. Now when you do fill it up, go gentle, because you don't want to disturb all the gravel that you've placed in the bottom of the pond there. Well, here we have it, our wildlife pond all ready to go. Now you might have noticed that I've added a few logs here and a bit of a stick pile. That's always a good thing to have near your pond because it's going to attract frogs. And you might also have noticed that I got this big slate on the edge of the pond, but put it on top of some bricks. And what that has done is created a little niche, a little hidey hole under here at the edge of the pond where other creatures might like to hide. The only thing I would say is that our pond at the minute is looking a bit bare, isn't it? Well, it's February now and it's too early to get hold of any pond plants, but give it a few weeks, we can get down to the garden centre and buy a couple of those. Before we wrap this up though, I want to give you one word of advice. You might have read elsewhere that it can be a good idea to get a bucket of pond water from a pond that's thriving with wildlife out in the countryside or at another site and bring that to your own garden pond to give it a kickstart with all the microbes and mini beasts that are living in that pond. But unless you really know what you're doing and you really know your plants, I would very much dissuade you from doing that. And that's because of biosecurity. And what I mean by that is that there can be invasive, non-native pond weeds living in another pond, and if you bring that into your own pond, it can be a nightmare to get rid of. Invasives like New Zealand pygmy weed, once it gets in there, you'll never get rid of it. So my advice would be, don't bring in pond water from elsewhere, let the pond life come to you, and kids will be amazed at how quickly, over the first year, this fresh new pond, with no life in it in the minute, starts buzzing with all kinds of insects and mini beasts. And that can be really satisfying in itself.
Thank you for watching this video, and I personally can't wait to see our pond develop over time.
Yeah, it's your own kids are going to be able to enjoy seeing the pond get better. And like a fine wine, it should get better with age.